He ate this entire thing of meat with his hands, and he did not wipe his fingers. I was watching. I'm kind of a neat freak when it comes to eating. Like, I'm always wiping my hands after ribs or something. He doesn't do that. He doesn't lick his fingers. He doesn't do anything. He just gets his coat and goes on. And from that point on, I was like, I can't with this man. He's going around with sticky meat fingers.
You know what, Vincent? He doesn't have to conform to your rules.
Hello and welcome to Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Podcast. We're your hosts, Matt Levine
and Vincent Hannum.
And we're talking about all our favorite monster movies, the good, the bad, and the downright campy, and asking if they stand the test of time.
Traditional kaiju, creature features, space invaders, the supernatural, and everything in between. All strange beasts are welcome here.
Camp Kaiju is brought to you by Zach Linder and the Zach Pack, powered by Coldwell Banker Realty. Whether you're looking for your dream home, a savvy investment property, or expert guidance in home rehab and flipping, the Zach Pack has you covered. Check the link in the show notes for more information.
O que é a vida? É o princípio da morte. O que é a morte? É o fim da vida. Ué, cadê a carne?
Hoje não tem. Você esqueceu que é sexta-feira santa?
Hoje eu como carne, nem que seja carne de gente. Qual o valor da vida? Se não há um filho para a continuidade da sangue, a mulher que não concebe filho não precisa de cuidado. Você vai me fazer muito e muito feliz. Qual a razão para me temerem? Porque uso roupa preta? Porque eu creio em mim? Toma um pedaço. Tá gostoso.
Hoje é dia santo, José.
Toma! Pegue o dinheiro do chão. Vamos!
Eu quero um filho! Leve a minha alma!
Hey, Vincent. How's it going?
Hey, Matt. Good.
Good.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm especially excited. Tonight we're talking about a very interesting movie called At Midnight, I'll Take Your Soul, a Brazilian movie. Some would say the first Brazilian horror movie from 1964. And extra excited because we have a special guest on the episode tonight. Hello again to Frank Olson.
Hello.
How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing okay.
Awesome.
Thank you again for joining us, Frank. Longtime listeners will know Frank well, all the Frankaholics out there. I feel like I'm pretty sure this is the first episode that you've joined this season, so it's good to have you back, Frank.
Yeah, the last one I was on, not counting like the year-end special, was when we did The Addiction last year. So, yeah, that was toward the end of the last season.
Yeah. Cool. Interesting vampire movie. Good conversation. A lot of religious themes in that one. I guess we'll have some maybe more anti-religious themes tonight that we'll talk about. But
yeah, it would be a pretty good double feature, actually, these two movies, I think.
It would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like this might be, At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul might be a good double feature with Alucarda as well, which we talked about on the podcast. So it's been kind of fun. We've been doing globe-trotting monster movies this season. I feel like that was maybe a little bit unintentional, but it's worked out well so far. Yeah, so again, tonight we'll be going to Brazil to talk about At Midnight, I'll Take Your Soul. All you listeners out there, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Please rate and review the show and follow us on patreon.com/campkaiju for additional videos, reviews, merchandise, and more. Other ways to get in touch include email at campkaiju@gmail.com, on our website, campkaijupodcast.com, on Instagram, and our voicemail number, 612-470-2612. As always, a special thank you to our current Patreon members, Jason, Chris, Sean, Peggy, our anonymous patron, Don, Steffi, and Jim Cheney. I feel like that list has grown a little bit since last time.
It hasn't, but it feels like it, doesn't it? That's okay.
That's awesome. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your support. Couldn't do it without you.
Honestly, thank you.
So yeah, as always on Camp Kaiju, we do a special little thing today around this time in monster movie history, calling out a couple horror or monster movies that have been made throughout cinematic history. So I have kind of a long list of monster movies that have come out around early April. Do any of those titles stand out to you guys? Frank, you can go first if you'd like.
Well, a title that stands out to me, although I don't know anything about this movie, is The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. That is a wild title. But in terms of a movie I actually know something about, that's an interesting movie. The Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabusa from 1960, which is the last of Fritz Lang's 3 Dr. Mabusa films, and also his last film before he died that he directed. But I guess I'll bring that one up because one of the first episodes I was on with you guys was years ago. We did the second movie in that series, The Testament of Dr. Mabusa, which is one of my favorite movies. But The Thousand Eyes is not quite as good as that, but it's very interesting. It's kind of an update of the idea of that Dr. Mabusa character being this kind of like borderline omnipotent supervillain. And in this one, it's more like he's doing a lot of video surveillance stuff. So it's kind of been updated for the era it came out. And it's a really interesting movie. It makes me wonder, if somebody were to do a Dr. Mabusa movie today, incorporating like modern technology, like the internet or social media or whatever, how they could kind of expand on those themes.
Yeah, I'm so glad you called out that movie. I love that movie. I saw it last year for the first time. I was also thinking of Mabusa. I feel like this might be kind of a stretch, but I feel like a similarity between Mabusa and Coffin Joe, who we'll be talking about later tonight, is that they're not really monsters, but it's sort of on the verge of men/monsters. Like they don't have a lot of like supernatural abilities, but still, something kind of, I don't know, paranormal almost is going on. Yeah, so there's kind of a connection there, maybe.
There's for sure a supernatural element.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's in their head or in reality, there we can have a debate. But there's certainly some spooky things going on.
Yeah.
And I think the climax of the movie and what ultimately happens to Coffin Joe is a little bit similar actually to the first Dr. Mabusa movie, Dr. Mabusa the Gambler, from way back in the silent era, which that movie, spoiler alerts from a movie that's over 100 years old. But at the end of that movie, like the ghosts of a lot of the people who Dr. Mabusa is wronged kind of come back to haunt him. And kind of a similar thing happens to Joe in the movie we're going to talk about tonight.
That's a good choice, Frank. And also, I'm glad you called out The Ghost with the Invisible Bikini. I added some titles on here that I have no idea what the movie is, but the title is just too great to not put on there. Another example of that is Joe Nosferatu, Homeless Vampire, which apparently is a movie that came out in 2004. I'm not expecting it to actually be good, but I am kind of morbidly curious to see that movie now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tasteful, yeah.
Yeah. Vincent, what about you? Any of those movies jump out at you?
Yeah, one of my favorite sequels, actually, from 1996. It's Tremors 2: Aftershocks. This movie was actually a direct-to-video sequel. With that said, though, the practical effects are still there. It looks like a main A picture. Like it doesn't look cheap in any way. Sorry, the actors are Fred Ward. He's returning as his character from the first Tremors, Earl. And Michael Gross also returns as Bert Gummer. So yeah, I think it's worth checking out. It continues the story. It's not just a rehash of the first. And it does some interesting things, introduces some key developments in the Tremors saga. So Tremors 2: Aftershocks. Dig it.
I've never seen it. I'll have to check that out. It's actually been a long time since I've seen the original also, but I'd never really heard much of anything about the second one. So you Selling it though, it makes it sound interesting.
I think it's a classic and stands the test of time.
Nice. There's the episode right there. We don't even have to do it. I've also never seen that movie. We talked about Tremors maybe like 2 years ago, 2 or 3. And it was fun to revisit that. It had been a long time for me. I think the movie that I'm going to pick off of this list is Dario Argento's Inferno from 1980. Argento is a little bit hit or miss, but like his hits are some of the best horror movies of all time. Suspiria is definitely very high up there. I really love Opera and Phenomena as well. But Inferno is great. It's so beautiful. It's not as gory as Suspiria, so like if you're a little bit squeamish about gore, you don't really have to worry with that movie too much. There aren't like extreme close-ups of like somebody's heart getting stabbed, so don't worry about that. But it's so beautiful, it's so strange. It's the second part of his like Mother trilogy, which is Suspiria, which is Mother of Sighs. Mother of Tears is the last one. I can't remember like the which mother that's in Inferno, but it's very, very good. Love that movie. Have either of you seen that?
Yeah.
No.
Good movie. Really good musical score too by, I think, Keith Emerson, maybe?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not Goblin who did the score for Suspiria.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not Goblin, which is weird because they soundtrack so many of his movies.
But yeah, Inferno, see it if you have not seen it, if you're an Argento fan especially. Underrated, I would say. In terms of new and upcoming monster movies, I'm curious if either of you have seen The Bride yet.
I saw it.
That doesn't sound great.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was disappointed. I like the basic premise of, the Bride of Frankenstein being, reanimated into this role as the Bride of Frankenstein, but then kind of rejecting it. But that was kind of, I mean, not kind of, it was done a lot better just a few years ago in the movie Poor Things, more or less. And also in this movie, it's just so muddled with other just like random storylines that go nowhere. Like there's a thing where Frankenstein's monster is this like obsessive fan of this like Fred Astaire style like song and dance movie star. And that goes nowhere. There's something where the bride at like random points is possessed by the spirit of Mary Shelley, who is like presented as this sort of like punk feminist, which I don't know a ton. I'm not like a big Mary Shelley scholar or anything, but it seems to have like nothing to do with her real life or like her considerable real achievements or her legacy or anything. It just seems like a totally random thing. And she speaks like when she becomes possessed by Mary Shelley, she's speaking this like Katharine Hepburn accent for some reason. And I'm like, what? Where is any of this coming from? And there's just it's just like really cluttered, and the tone, not just from scene to scene, but even like within scenes, like from moment to moment, the tone keeps like wildly changing, which makes the movie sort of like lively, but it also eventually just kind of gets tedious because there's like no real like momentum being built because it's just the movie's just all over the place. So there's a couple good performances, like Jessie Buckley, like she's the bride, and her performance is very like uninhibited, and she's kind of like throwing everything against the wall. So like periodically she'll, just have some like really crazy line reading or like body movement or something that's like amusing because it's so strange, but it doesn't really add up to a great performance overall. And Christian Bale is actually very good as Frankenstein's monster. It's like a relatively more restrained performance compared to hers, but yeah, overall it's just not very good. I was disappointed.
I still want to see it though, but that's too bad to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping it would be interestingly bad, but it kind of just sounds bad for the most part.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for, interesting bad. If I've learned one thing on this podcast, it's to appreciate the interestingly bad films.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like her as an actress, but yeah, as a writer and director, I'm not sure. I don't know. She's more skilled as an actress than as a writer or director, at least based on The Bride. I haven't seen her first movie, The Lost Daughter, but
I have seen The Lost Daughter, which I thought was good, and like again had good performances and everything, but I was like, this could be like a little bit more like wild and crazy and have more of like an intense visual style. So when I saw the trailer for The Bride, I was like, all right, this seems like a step in the right direction, like a little more, formally audacious or whatever. But actually, it might be a step in the wrong direction. So I would like to see it at some point. It does not sound very good though.
We shall find a happy medium in our third movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope so. All right, what is coming up on Camp Kaiju, Vincent?
Next episode is called The Black Scorpion. It's about the Black Scorpion from 1957. It is a giant bug kaiju movie from Hollywood, from the USA, in the age of atomic monsters. What's noteworthy about this film, it is brought to life by the stop motion effects of Willis O'Brien, who created King Kong in 1933 and The Lost World, which we'll be talking about later too. So I think it's a pretty interesting glimpse into late career Willis O'Brien, who at this point was most certainly eclipsed by Ray Harryhausen, his protege. But O'Brien still in the game, or at least he has something left in the tank. So I'm excited to see what that is in The Black Scorpion.
That sounds cool. I can't wait to see it. I'm glad that you're turning me on to some more like 1950s stop motion animation monster movies, because I'm sorely undereducated in that subgenre. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll have a double feature with Willis O'Brien, because we'll be talking about The Lost World from 1925 and our episode after that. So yeah, some good episodes coming up. By the way, you mentioned Instagram before, and I wanted to shout out a meme that you posted on the Camp Kaiju channel earlier today, which is Hell Frasier. And it's just a shot of Frasier Crane with like the theme song from that sitcom, but he has like pins all over his face, like Pinhead. And I burst out laughing at that and could not stop, even though it's like kind of a stupid joke, but it is hilarious. Good job on that meme.
I also burst out laughing. It was an instant reshare. I just had to do it. Hell Frasier.
I haven't even seen the image, but that sounds hilarious. Just imagining it.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, Frank, check it out on the Camp Kaiju social Instagram page. Another thing I want to see come to fruition now, It'd be amazing. I feel like Hellraiser is not too far beyond Frasier. Like, it's a natural connection right there. Vincent, you have some things in our other news category here on the Google Doc.
Yeah, sorry guys, just real quick. I know we're throwing a lot of things here, but the Rondo Awards are open. The voting for this is open. Now, if you're not familiar with the Rondo Awards, I could paraphrase, or I can just read from their website, rondoaward.com. So since 2002, the Rondos have been fandom's only classic horror awards, decided by fans for fans. So every nominee below is recognized for significant achievements in 2025. So listeners, Camp Kaiju was nominated by fans, by you all, and we have been chosen on a short list of nominees for Best Website, which is not Best Podcast. We were nominated for that category the previous year, but we have a nomination, and we stand amongst giants of classic horror fandom. But there's a whole ton of categories. Everyone should check this out. Link in the show notes.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. Cool.
Yeah. After that bit of news, Mothra Day, people. Mark your calendars. Bloomington, Indiana, June 12th. Mothra Day. Our friend of the pod, Beth Breadlaw, she worked her kaiju magic and got the mayor of Bloomington, Indiana to declare that weekend Mothra Day, Mothra Weekend. And just like last year, she did the same thing with the mayor of Bloomington, who sounds like a great guy, to declare it Godzilla Day and Weekend last year. And Beth orchestrated this great festival with screenings at the local cinema. She's going to do the same this year. Maybe Camp Kaiju will be there as a guest panelist. We don't know. It's only the second year for this wonderful little festival, but props to Beth. Kudos to you out there, and let's make it happen. So that's.
I wonder if the mayor of Bloomington, Indiana, is like an enthusiastic horror fan or something, or if he's just like, Beth, leave me alone. We'll do it fine. but either way, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
After 20 more calls in one day, the mayor of Bloomington has finally agreed to do Mothra Day.
It's like,
That's amazing. I hope for Mothra weekend they just play the insanely catchy Mothra theme nonstop, like public loudspeakers the entire weekend. It'd be great.
Throughout the whole town.
Yeah. Yep. Drive everybody insane.
Also in the summer, Matt, any updates on Piranha and creature features at the Heights?
It's still in the works. I can say at this point it is likely that Piranha will play May 8th at the Heights Theater up here in Minneapolis. I should be totally candid and say that I work at the Heights, so there is kind of a inside connection / conflict of interest, but we'll go with inside connection. Yeah, so Piranha, great Joe Dante, fun, monster movie. May 8th, most likely we'll be playing. And then Vincent and I have kind of programmed a series of 8 monster movies that hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll play at the Heights for like the next 2 months after that, like on a weekly basis. So hopefully, yeah, creature feature series at the Heights this summer, but to be confirmed on that.
Sounds jawsome.
Yeah, although Jaws will not be one of the movies in that series.
Oh.
I feel like I need to say, but there will be, if it all works, if it all comes to fruition, there will be so many other good movies in that series. Stay tuned for more info on that.
Will do. Okay.
Yeah, so tonight we are talking about Brazilian horror movie At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul from 1964. I'm curious what your personal histories are with this movie.
0. Not since last year when you suggested it. So I watched it for the first time the other night, did a little research on this character, Coffin Joe, Brazilian horror films. I'm ready to rock and roll.
I knew of the Coffin Joe character vaguely. Like, I knew enough to know that he was, either a South or Central American, like, horror icon of some sort, but I wouldn't have even been able to tell you he was from Brazil or like anything about the character, really. So this was all pretty brand new to me, aside from just, vaguely knowing that he was a popular character in that area of the world.
Well, I'm glad that, my selection, introduced both of you guys to this character and this director. Hopefully it was not a bad experience for you guys. We'll learn more about that later. So At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul. I think I first saw it maybe in 2010. So it's been kind of a long time. I can't remember exactly how I first heard about this movie. I think I just read the title somewhere, read that it was one of the earliest, if not the first, Brazilian horror movie about a character named Coffin Joe. And I was like, I need to see this movie. And I liked it when I first saw it. It had been so long, I barely remembered anything about it. It was fun to rewatch. And I don't know, we'll get into all the details, but if you're a horror lover, there's so much to enjoy about this movie. It's just like the opening credits, for example, you have like a cackling witch and like eerie wind sound effects and spooky music. It's like walking into like a Halloween funhouse,
Not since Dracula stalked the earth has the world known so terrifying a day or night.
It is I who renounce you, and in the name of Satan I place a curse upon you.
Black Sunday is like no motion picture you've ever seen. There are those who believe and those who do not. But both must know the suspense, the shock of meeting the living dead and of bringing the dead to life.
Look into my eyes. Embrace me. You will die, but I can bring you pleasures mortals cannot know.
Black Sunday, the most terrifying motion picture you'll ever see. Satan, wearing strange robes and fighting with all the furies of Hades, arouses the countryside to a frenzy of black terror.
can run from Suspiria. You can hide from Suspiria. Suspiria. But you cannot escape Suspiria. The only thing more terrifying than the last 12 minutes of Suspiria are the first 92.
The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini goes fun haunting. Boris Karloff as Hiram Stokely gives orders to Susan Hart as the Ghost.
What you have to do is to see that my rightful heirs get the money.
They're on the wildest way out weekend the in crowd's ever had. Starring Tommy Kirk, Deborah Wally, Aaron Kincaid, Harvey Limbeck, Nancy Sinatra.
Everybody's singing about a broken heart. Don't you know, can't you see it's tearing me?
It's Camp on a musical horror holiday. Nancy sings her newest hits with that old Sinatra beat. The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini, in color.
You know, often on Camp Kaiju, names in other languages can be a little bit difficult sometimes. So I looked up the pronunciation of his name. This is the director, co-writer, and star of At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul. Jose Mojica Marins is apparently how you pronounce it. So I'm not going to hold you guys to that pronunciation, but I just wanted to figure out the correct pronunciation.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of info on much of the cast and crew in this movie, but there is a ton of fascinating info about this guy. So we can do a deep dive into Jose Mojica Marins. He was born on Friday the 13th, March 13th, 1936 to be exact, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, to Spanish parents. Jose's father operated a movie theater, and the family lived in an apartment above it. So Jose was kind of conditioned to love movies ever since he was a young kid. His son, Krunel, later said that his father, Jose Mojica Marins, loved Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Hitchcock, Orson Welles, Charlie Chaplin. So just a movie lover, definitely a horror lover, but also just a fan of cinema in general. He started making movies from a very young age. Jose, he would make short films with a camera that his parents had given him as a present. These short films often just starred himself and his neighbors and his friends, and he would just screen them in churches and amusement parks and wherever he possibly could.
First film was Terminator 2 Judgment Day. No, sorry. It's just called Judgment Day. It was shot on 8mm in 1948 when he was 12 years old. He then got a 16mm camera and shot 17 movies over 3 years, most of them melodramas, mysteries, and supernatural horror. At 18 years old, Jose founded the Atlas Film Company, acquiring an abandoned synagogue and turning it into a film studio. He gave acting lessons and trained technicians in order to finance his films. Nice. Savvy of him.
Yeah.
His low-budget movies often featured his friends and other amateur actors in sensational genres like sexploitation and drugsploitation. His first two features were a Western called Adventure's Fate in 1958 and a gritty drama called My Destiny in Your Hands in 1963. But his career would truly take off with At Midnight, I'll Take Your Soul and the Coffin Joe character. Our director, Jose Mojica Marins, is a fascinating person. Did you know he owned his own perfume line, ran for political office, and had 23 children with various wives? But that's not the most interesting thing. We'll go back to the political office. The ballots weren't even allowed because people voted for Coffin Joe instead of him. And he had 23 children with various wives. How Coffin Joe of him.
Yeah.
I would love to know what his perfume smelled like.
I don't.
Right. It cannot smell good, right? like, weird candles and tarantulas and like wood, like old wood. That's what I imagine. But like, what an interesting guy. His biography is just like a checklist of like fascinating facts. I didn't put in this section. I think I put it a little bit later in the Google Doc, but the like long fingernails that the Coffin Joe character has in this movie, Maureen's had like he wears his fingernails that way. That wasn't specially like an element of the character. He already had them that way. So just a weird guy, fascinating guy. He died in 2020. But yeah, what unique person. That's kind of a good segue, Frank. Are you able to talk a little bit more about the Coffin Joe character?
Yeah. So this film was his first appearance. After this, there were a couple other movies. This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse, and also the third that came out in 1967, and then the third film, Embodiment of Evil, came out way later in 2008. So these ones apparently loosely follow Coffin Joe's attempts to bear a male son in order to achieve immortality through procreation. So kind of continuing what he's trying to do in this movie. I actually read a little bit about the second movie earlier today, This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse, and I'm interested in seeing it because apparently, although the movie is mostly in black and white, just like the one we're talking about tonight, there's a color sequence that's set in hell, and hell is apparently cold instead of hot in this version, and the actor, director, writer, etc., who plays Coffin Joe also plays Satan in that scene, apparently. So that sounds very interesting.
I love it when hell is depicted as actually a frozen wasteland. Because literary nerd here, in Dante's Inferno, the 7 layers of hell, the final layer with Satan himself, Lucifer, is ice cold. So you go through all this fire to get to what's probably equally painful and awful.
Wow. That's a cool insight. I like that. Do you know if Paradise Lost, do you know if hell is kind of depicted the same way in that?
I don't actually.
Okay. I'm not obviously not a literary expert, so I wasn't even aware of Inferno and have no idea about Paradise Lost, but I'd be interested to find out more.
Same.
And the character, the Coffin Joe character, also appeared in films like Awakening of the Beast from 1970, which has test subjects dosed with LSD who see Coffin Joe in hallucinations. Sounds very 1970. The Bloody Exorcism of Coffin Joe from 1974, which is a self-reflexive movie about the director being haunted by the character he created. So that's a bit ahead of its time. That almost sounds like, Wes Craven's New Nightmare or something like 20 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And Hallucinations of a Deranged Mind from 1978, in which a scientist has nightmares about Coffin Joe and asks for the director's help in exorcising him from his dreams. And a lot of these movies were actually banned in Brazil because of their graphic violence, sexual content. And I can imagine also maybe some of the blasphemy possibly getting it banned, even though it's, the blasphemy, at least in this first movie, is depicted as being wrong.
Yeah.
I could see it still, ruffling some feathers in a heavily Christian country.
Right, right. Heavily Catholic country, too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like he also played the same character in a bunch of TV shows. The Strange World of Coffin Joe, Beyond, Far Beyond the Beyond. I love that title. and The Show from the Other World. And there's also a bunch of Coffin Joe comic books and music videos. I was also reading earlier today about it. Apparently there's a DVD box set re-release of these Coffin Joe movies that also include some of the comic books along with it, which is cool.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Coffin Joe is played by the director, correct?
Yes. Indeed.
Right. Yep. So that's interesting. In these kind of spin-off properties, these other movies, is it the same actor, same director? Is he involved in any other way?
Yeah, it's him basically through all of them. He was so associated with this character throughout his whole career. Like, that's why when he ran for office, people were voting for Coffin Joe instead of him, because that's like how the Brazilian people knew him, basically. I think there are a couple later movies in which like other actors play younger versions of Coffin Joe, like Embodiment of Evil, I think, because that's from 2008. So there's like an older version of Coffin Joe, but then I think there are flashbacks and a different actor plays him. But for the most part, it's Jose Mojica Marins like the entire way.
What a legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the type of thing, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but it seems like the kind of thing where there would probably be like knockoffs, where like maybe some other actor is taking on the role like unofficially. It just seems like that kind of thing, sort of like, the Django series of spaghetti westerns or whatever, where there's all these like unofficial sequels and things like that. Seems like it would probably have happened with Coffin Joe too, although I don't know that for sure.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems likely. Yeah. But yeah, just to wrap up that section, Frank, thank you very much. And Coffin Joe, just like such an iconic figure in Brazilian culture. He's been described as Brazil's national boogeyman and compared to Freddy Kreuger. So he really has kind of this huge, pervasive, like pop culture horror icon status in Brazil. I feel like outside of Brazil, though, like we were talking about before, most people don't really know about Coffin Joe. Not as like famous a figure, certainly in the United States, I think.
Yeah, this seems, I'm not like a horror junkie as much as I do love the genre. I admit, like, especially with really cult things and things of this nature in terms of its violence and whatnot, I'm not as schooled as maybe some others. So if there are any listeners out there who like eat, sleep, and breathe horror, let us know if you have heard of Coffin Joe. I'd be really interested to see if it's just my ignorance because I'm just not in tune with that circle of horror in particular.
Yeah, and if there are other icons and like other national cultures that we should talk about or like watch the movies and we're not aware of them, let us know those too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think some of the later Coffin Joe movies do get pretty like deranged and sadistic. Like I feel like, Frank, your point about the blasphemy in this movie, I feel like the blasphemy is like the most shocking part about it. And there are some scenes that are kind of tough to watch in this movie, but in terms of like, and like some gory moments, but they're kind of like schlocky and cheesy a little bit, But from what I've read, like the later movies do get like, very graphic and very demented. And I want to watch them, but I'm also like a little bit nervous to do so. Like scenes in which women are like in pits of live snakes and like tarantulas crawling all over them and stuff. Like there's one tarantula in this movie, and that I think keeps on going in some of the other Coffin Joe movies. So yeah, I don't know. I'll have to work up the nerve to watch the rest of these movies.
Yeah, I did see a screenshot from what I think might be the second movie where a woman has tarantulas like all over her body instead of just the one that's in this movie. But yeah.
Look, if we think about international films and the way distribution works, because we talk about this with the Japanese films all the time. I mean, it wasn't until the 21st century that even Godzilla movies were widely accessible in the West, in the United States. And then we're talking about Godzilla, and everyone knew who Godzilla was. So we're talking about the controversial nature of these movies, the Coffin Joe movies. It actually doesn't surprise me that they never made it out of Brazil, because it would require a foreign distributor to say, yeah, let's release that in Hollywood, in downtown Cleveland. Nobody's going to do that. And
I think maybe it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I think the fact that they are so hard to see like adds to their cult status, and then this sort of like lore builds up around them, and then people do like want to see them, and then distributors are like, all right, we can make a profit putting this stuff out there,
Well, yeah, but that's the great thing now about the internet. I don't know. I watched this on Tubi, and Tubi just, to me, seems like this net of I don't know, distribution. What's the word? But they seem to scoop up anything and everything. Yeah. And there it was.
Yeah, and it's on Prime Video, it's on YouTube, so it's like, and Frank, like you were saying, it's part of that. I think it's an Arrow Video box set as well, so it's like not really hard to find these days, but it was for a long time.
I bet.
Like I said before, it's hard to find information about the rest of the cast and crew. Most of them were amateurs and unprofessionals and just people that were part of Marine's film school. But I did want to shout out a couple of the cast members because they are put in some very uncomfortable positions, it seems, in this movie. Magda Mai plays Teresina, who's the woman that Coffin Joe is kind of obsessed with and wants to bear his child. Navaldo Lima as Antonio, who is maybe the only person in the movie that Coffin Joe could call a friend, although it does not end well for Antonio. We also have Valeria Vasquez as Lanita, who starts off as Coffin Joe's wife. Things also don't end well for her. She's the poor person who has a tarantula crawling all over her. And then the last actor I want to shout out is Elidio Martins Simoes and his amazing hair, like matinee idol hair, playing Dr. Rodolfo. I know nothing more than their names to these actors, but they make an impression in this movie. So let's talk a little bit more about the production backstory of At Midnight, I'll Take Your Soul. Again, this is commonly seen as the first Brazilian horror movie from 1964. Marins said the idea came to him in a dream where he dragged himself into a cemetery while wearing Coffin Joe's signature black costume and lowered himself into his own grave, which was already marked with his tombstone. Marins said that he woke up from this dream, like, screaming and totally petrified, and his family was very nervous and called for a doctor right away. And that day, Marins was like, all right, I have to make a movie with this character in it. Ironically, though, he did not initially intend to play the character himself. He was trying to cast a different actor in the role of Coffin Joe, but it was hard to do so. Marins later said nobody wanted to look like a fool. They weren't, like, scared of the blasphemy or the violence or anything like that. They just basically didn't want to look stupid. So he took the role himself.
He financed it by selling his car and apartment, and even had his wife move back in with her parents throughout the duration of the shoot, which I'm sure was a tricky conversation. Although maybe with him, who knows? Maybe he threatened to, put a tarantula on her or something. She didn't do it. He charged his acting students to appear in the film instead of paying them, and compensated only a few members of the production. I do find it interesting that he teaches acting, because I would not say, although he definitely has a presence, I would not say he's like a conventionally talented actor.
Yeah.
At least judging by this movie. In one infamous anecdote, the crew was refusing to shoot a scene because there just wasn't enough sunlight, and the director forced them to proceed with the shot by pointing a gun at the cameraman. Some real Werner Herzog type stuff.
Yeah.
And to recover the costs on the production, he sold the distribution rights to Elidio. Oh boy, the guy who plays Dr. Rodolfo. I'm not going to try to pronounce his real name. He sold the distribution rights to him before the premiere, which worked out well for both of them.
Marins does not sound like the easiest guy to live with or work with. He was married numerous times throughout his career, and just hearing some of these production stories, it's like I don't know. I'm fascinated by stories of, like, directors who run their film sets like a dictator, like just like forcing people to do their bidding. I wouldn't want to work with him, but I find that fascinating.
Fascinating, but like, is he? I don't know. I'm speaking from a place of ignorance. Frank, you mentioned Werner Herzog. Did he kind of have a similar incident with a gun? What's going on there? What's going on with Werner?
He's just known for, like, doing super crazy, kind of like dangerous things to film his movies. Like, he has a movie, Fitzcarraldo, for example, where the part of the plot of that movie involves, like, taking this gigantic ship through the jungle, and they have to, like, take it up, like, this extremely muddy hill, and they actually did that. Like, they actually did it when they were filming it, and like people died doing it and stuff. And he also worked a lot with the actor Klaus Kinski, and I know they kind of had some like violent incidents with each other during shoots and things like that, like getting into.
I guess my big question, it's just a big question. Yeah. I don't have a definitive answer. Who does? At what point can your, let's say abusive eccentricities be maybe more tolerated because you are Werner Herzog and you're making, a masterpiece, or you're making At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul, which has its own merits, but can we excuse this director for that kind of attitude?
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything in it that's worth pointing a gun at somebody for.
Yeah.
I would say that. Yeah.
And that's not to excuse that. If Spielberg pointed a gun at somebody, I'd still say that's unacceptable, good sir.
Yeah.
But I hope my point is just out there, and you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. My own stance on stuff like that is I kind of, separate that, I guess, from the results on screen a little bit. I don't think that like praising a work of art is necessarily, praising the person who created it, because obviously a lot of artists are very, damaged, flawed people, even if they're geniuses at what they do. But
yeah,
like you said, everyone's going to have their own line with that sort of thing.
Like, I kind of think of like Kubrick directing Shelley Duvall in The Shining and some of the emotional like turmoil that he put her through, or like
great example.
Yeah, like William Friedkin on the set of The Exorcist, like right before they shot a scene, he like slapped the actor who played the priest really hard to like get that sort of dazed expression on his face. And yeah, it's an interesting ethical question. Like, do the ends justify the means? I'm definitely not saying that. I just think it's interesting, like larger than life people who kind of are abrasive personalities. I don't really want to know them or work with them, but it's like fascinating to hear about that stuff,
Yeah.
We can go on and on about examples, actors, directors, producers. It can get gross pretty fast. So yes. I don't mind moving on to plenty of other gross things I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yeah. This is a gross movie, for sure. Sometimes in fun ways. I don't know if that sounds like a paradox, but yeah, a gross fun movie. Hard to watch at times, though, too. Apparently, other audiences thought so as well in Brazil when it was released on November 9th, 1964. It was an unexpected hit. I tried to find budget and box office figures, but maybe not surprisingly, they are very hard to find on the internet for this movie. But Brazilian film historians, Laura Canepa is one example. I read an essay that she wrote. She says that the first two Coffin Joe films were major box office hits that allowed horror films to find their place in Brazil. The film did raise controversy when it was released. There was a military dictatorship that had just been established in Brazil about 7 months earlier in 1964 that later, like many, I think that dictatorship lasted like 20-some years, and censorship got, very strict, more strict as time went on. But even in this early stage, they did censor this movie. It was still released, and in some places it was released in like an uncensored version. But in other places, the government did censor the film. In one case, a government bureaucrat actually rewrote the dialogue in a late scene and dubbed over it. Presumably some of the very blasphemous, sacrilegious dialogue is what the government took offense with. The film, At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul, helped give rise to a film movement called Cinema da Boca do Lixo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. In English, that roughly translates to Cinema of the Mouth of Garbage, through which independent filmmakers in Brazil resisted the increasingly strict censorship of the government. And as we already talked about, the success of this film and the second Coffin Joe film led to the establishment of that character as a huge pop culture figure in Brazil, who remained popular, if controversial, for several decades thereafter. All right, time for our sponsor break. I don't know how our sponsor feels about going right from Coffin Joe to a sponsor break, but here it is nonetheless. Camp Kaiju is brought to you by Zach Linder and the Zach Pack, powered by Coldwell Banker Realty. Whether you're looking for your dream home, a savvy investment property, or expert guidance in home rehab and flipping, the Zach Pack has you covered. Check the link in the show notes for more information. Vincent, what do we have in Mina's mailbox today?
Just real quick from our Patreon supporter, Jim Cheney. He recommends the movie Hail Mary that just came out with Ryan Gosling.
Project Hail Mary.
Project Hail Mary, correct. I've been hearing good things, and I appreciate the word of mouth. I don't think that happens enough with mainstream movies these days. So, maybe it's worth checking out. Everyone's talking about it.
I'm excited to see it.
We have an email from longtime listener Kaiju Nick, who emailed us in support. Actually, Kaiju Nick commented on our website, campkaijupodcast.com. He commented in response to our recent special episode about Tom Shabilla's book, King Kong vs. Godzilla. And Tom was on the episode to talk about his book. But Kaiju Nick says, Camp Kaiju, the Mozart string quartets, the Sistine Chapel, King Kong escapes. Monet's water lilies, Beethoven's symphonies, King Kong escapes. Great achievements of mankind.
Wow.
Amazing. Kaiju Nick, thank you. You always know just what to say. I agree. King Kong escapes. Don't sleep on it, folks.
I have a soft spot for the 1976. Is that when it came out? That remake of King Kong. I might like that one a little bit more than King Kong versus Godzilla or King Kong Escapes, but that is just my opinion.
We'll see. We'll see. We're going to be watching and talking about that movie soon.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kaiju Nick. Thank you, Jim. Thank you to all writing in, calling in. We have some voicemails we're going to feature on our next episode, Black Scorpion. So stay tuned.
I didn't know we had voicemails. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Is it Crank Yankers? I hope it is.
Was it you?
You finally listened to it. I've been waiting for you to talk about it.
Maybe it was Peter Lorre. He's gonna talk. Okay, so he's I don't know. He's kind of in and out right now with communication. I thought he was having a good time on vacation, doing his thing remote, but I think his wife, Lenore, this is some sad news. You know how she was a raven at the end of last season? And he recited the poem, The Raven, and through the powers of black magic, Lenore became a beautiful woman. You remember that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, sad news, Lenore is starting to sprout feathers and turn back into a raven.
That is sad news.
Support for Peter and Lenore in this moment. I don't know what's going to happen with that situation, but bless him, he's recording his things and he's sending them in as he can. This week's episode is about a 1946 film called The Face of Marble. Our letterbox synopsis reads, The last gasp in Chillers. It is the story of Dr. Charles Randolph, a scientist dedicated to deciphering the secrets of life and death. Aided by assistant David Cochran, Charles conducts experiments that have horrifying side effects. Charles's lonely wife, Elaine, is frightened by his work, and in order to protect her, housekeeper Maria unleashes a torrent of, here it is, voodoo that wreaks havoc. Mad scientists, voodoo witch doctors. Sure. You can either go very wrong or be just perfect. I don't know yet.
I'm hoping for just perfect. For Peter Lorre's sake, I'm hoping for just perfect.
He needs a feel-good movie these days. Maybe this will be it for him. He loves this stuff.
Yeah.
John Carradine is in this movie. I just want to mention.
I get the Carradines mixed up. Am I the only one? Do you guys get the Carradines mixed up as well? Because Keith Carradine is the younger one. Okay. Right? John Carradine is the older one?
John Carradine, I believe, is the father of Keith Carradine and even Robert Carradine. And there's
David Carradine, right?
David Carradine.
David might be the most well-known one, right? Is he the one that's in Kill Bill?
Yeah. David's the only one where I can for sure picture him offhand. I'm sure I'd recognize the other guys if I saw them, but he's the only one where I'm all right, this face goes with this guy.
Right.
Keith Carradine. Aha.
Was Keith in Q the Winged Serpent? One of the Carradines was, I think. We're getting real off base now. Sorry.
Carradine podcast coming to you. Yes, David Carradine. Right. He had the unfortunate demise in a closet. But I was thinking of the other Carradine who just died, actually, but he was in Revenge of the Nerds. He was the youngest.
Oh. He just died?
Yeah, he did. His name is Robert Carradine. He was also the dad on Lizzie McGuire.
Okay.
Yes.
I hope we bring Lizzie McGuire to the podcast someday, too. It's only a matter of time, right?
If we're doing this when we're 80, I will welcome Lizzie McGuire on the show.
Out of monster movies.
We'll find some extremely thin way to connect it. I don't know how exactly.
Yeah. rest in peace, the Carradines, and thank you, Mr. Laurie. I hope Lenore is doing all right.
He loved Lenore as a raven, right? So maybe he's kind of okay with her reverting to avian form.
You never know. Relationships are personal, they're private. I know how I would feel if Ellen turned into a bird. Not great, but I'm not Peter Lorre, who is a reanimated corpse among the living. So who knows?
You never know with that guy. Yeah.
Welcome to the Poverty Row Studios on the other side of Hollywood, where the stars were dimmer and the red carpets dripped with blood. Together we will watch the best of the worst. Yes, movies known for their limited budgets, outlandish concepts, and questionable performances, but with enough haunted houses, zombies, ape men, and devil bats to keep you up at night. This is the Poverty Row Picture Show, and I dare you to sleep through these nightmares. Greeting, guys and ghouls. I am your devilish host, Peter Lorre. You may remember me from such sinister cinematic movies as M. You remember the Fritz Lang picture that came after L and right before N. And, oh, who am I kidding? Listeners, I have not been my usual quick-witted self these days. You see, my beautiful Lenore, once a raven, is inexplicably returning to that frightening feathered form. Oh, Lenore, I do not have it in me to recite another poem, and yet, oh, ye gods, what am I to do? Well, keep calm and carry on, they say. This week I am reviewing a monogram film called The Face of Marble from 1946. It stars John Carradine, yes, as a scientist who seeks to bring the dead back to life through some electroshock mechanism. In true B-movie fashion, his experiments with the contraband cadavers naturally runs afoul of the law and his beloved. But that is not all. The Face of Marble truly takes a turn for the bizarro when the housekeeper is a voodoo witch doctor and through a series of unfortunate events mistakenly kills Carradine's wife. But fear not, the dearly departed is, yes, you guessed it, brought back to life through the mad machinations of the doctor. Except she is more of a ghost, who is now roaming the house for revenge with their dog, who died earlier and is now also a ghost. Listeners, The Face of Marble is as strange as its title. It hardly makes a lick of sense, and yet, somehow in its 70 minutes, perhaps it is strange enough to sit through. Perhaps our next movie will be even more bizarre. A monster flick called The Flying Serpent, starring that rascal George Zucco. What is this? What? My podcasting microphone is picking up a message. It appears to be a coded signal from the gods. No, it cannot be. But yes, listeners, it is coming from out there, from a world beyond ours. Perhaps it is a message of hope for Lenore. Speak to me, ye gods of the outer limits. Speak to me.
The artist, the poet, the figure model who loves to show it.
You suppose he could be physically attracted to her?
No, man, he ain't the type. He don't get enough vitamin E.
All these are beat. All these you'll meet in A Bucket of Blood.
Let us make the scene. Crazy.
Come, enjoy yourself. Where the hilarious enjoy the horrifying in A Bucket of Blood.
No, you're gonna shoot me! Don't shoot! come to the land of living dreams, where realists dream of the unreal.
Walter, you've done something to me. Something deep down inside of my prana. Oh, Walter, I want to be with you. You're creative.
Beatniks at their bawdiest. The creative urge at its most primitive.
I'm deeply moved, and I shall compose a poem.
Love is art. Art is love. It's the weirdest and the wildest.
I don't want to make statues anymore. I want to get married. To you.
I hope they're doing well. So back to At Midnight, I'll Take Your Soul. For better or worse, we'll go back to that movie. So what themes are in this movie? I do have some written down here, but I feel like maybe we can just say what's on the top of our heads. Any themes jump out at you guys?
I think one thing that's interesting about this movie is first of all, the protagonist is also like the bad guy, clearly. Like, he's a horrible human being. Murderer and rapist and, just a all-around horrible guy. But he is the monsters who sort of wind up haunting him or, attacking him in some ways are not exactly necessarily like these godly figures, but it sort of seems like, the god who he doesn't believe in is sort of getting a revenge on him through these monsters, which is like an interesting reversal from how it normally is, Normally in horror movies, it's like people don't believe in these demonic forces or something, and then those are what are attacking them. But in this case, this is a guy who's like, very staunchly denouncing religion, and then that religion in some form seems to be coming back to haunt him.
Yeah, religion's huge in this movie. There's a whole Day of the Dead, a period of time in the film. I think the climax happens on the Day of the Dead, which is a holy day in this movie, and other townspeople, like, they won't even venture out. Everyone's shut in because they respect the spirits that they do believe in. And Coffin Joe is just laughing in the face of all and any, I don't know, moral code or respect for not just religion, but like, because at that point it's almost like beyond religion. It's like these are our beliefs. This is our culture. And Coffin Joe has no respect for any sort of grounding element in these people's lives. Like, they believe because it helps them through their day, and he's like, no, I just want to, I don't know, do what I want to do.
He's taking care of number one. Yeah.
But I will say there are moments where he does struggle with his faith. Those are the more interesting parts of the film to me. He has this really long monologue, rant, shaking his fist at the heavens scene where he's, I think, effectively, it's shot and performed effectively to convey his internal struggle in very outsized terms. So I found that effective.
Yeah, I read an interesting review that said that even though he has no belief in God or religion or the afterlife or any kind of like moral code, basically, still when like the witch, the evil witch, the old hag, I think is what the credits call her, not very kindly, but when she gives him his like very, gloomy, she reads his fortune, and she's like, you're going to die. You're going to be sucked down to hell, basically. You'll be tormented. I mean, he's like, he gets very angry. He's even maybe scared a little bit. So one of the reviews I read was like, he doesn't really believe in this stuff, and yet he's also terrified that it might be true.
Yeah, that's universal. That's very identifiable. I mean, even the faithful among us, we still have we still think, but like, we don't know. And it's that idea. I mean, I reverse the example, but like, if you're not faithful, you still don't know. Like nobody knows, you know?
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting too that like the director's own bad experiences with Catholicism informed this movie, because I had the impression watching it that, it almost plays a little bit like a grim fairy tale or something, where like it seems like the ultimate lesson is he should have believed in God and all these things that are like inherent in Brazilian culture that he's railing against, because, ultimately it kind of overtakes. He's sort of proven wrong by the end of the movie. But yeah, so I think that's interesting that he, the real person is sort of anti-Catholicism, because it just seems like it's such an ingrained part of the culture that he comes from, that he's still on some level, it's just so much a part of him and everything he was raised with, that it must inform everything he does,
Yeah, and the fact that Coffin Joe is him, like he became so closely entwined with his alter ego, essentially. Like that is such an interesting layer to this whole conversation, because I'm just speaking personally, and based on what little I do know about Jose Marines, I don't know if I'm watching a character. Like I feel like I'm watching a man who has been given permission to like bring his fantasies to life through the construct of film. And that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This man makes me uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. This character, this director, I'm uncomfortable with this whole thing.
Yeah, the character certainly is not a good dude. The director, that's probably a little more debatable, but the character definitely is not somebody you want to emulate for sure. And, there's like, I'm not really up in my Nietzschean philosophy, but like some of the dialogue is like verbatim from like the theory of like the Ubermensch, or the Superman, who thinks that he's superior to everybody else because everybody else is kind of ignorant and foolish and believes in these superstitions. And the Ubermensch is the only one who has the courage to like understand the world and like get whatever he wants. Basically, it's a very Nietzschean concept. So there have been some things written about that aspect to Coffin Joe's character. But yeah, basically he's just a selfish prick, like and he's punished for it. Frank, I think what you said, he's punished by the God that he doesn't believe in. I really like that point a lot. And I think it is interesting to think like how much Catholicism has permeated Brazilian culture, that, it's so much a part of this movie, even if it's supposedly against that, There's a really good quote by this critic named Dan Stalkup. I'd never heard of him before. Maybe I can add a link to the show notes later, but it's a really good review. And he writes, "Whether God is real and righteously bestowing vengeance to the sacrilegious Joe, or God is a myth and Joe simply drives himself mad with his exaggerated nihilism, it ultimately does not matter, because the concept of God defeats Joe either way." I really love that line, and I think that kind of gets to the tension at the heart of the movie a little bit.
I'll try to make it brief, but we're talking about philosophy now. I didn't expect to go in this direction. I love it. To me, it's directly tying back into our addiction episode, which was all about philosophy, and it was all about, I don't remember the exact terms or schools of philosophy, but if you're talking about, that's a legit study. Like we all have Coffin Joe's tendencies, many would argue, but we keep them in check through cultural norms, through our own codes. But like, if we chose to, we could all be as violent as Coffin Joe. So in that sense, this movie shouldn't be viewed as like a realistic movie. It should be viewed as almost a fantasy. Like here is the ego gone mad. This is what it could look like. Yeah, do whatever the hell you want. Ultimately, there is a consequence. I don't know. You can go in a lot of different directions with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I thought also it was interesting that he's sort of a guy who considers himself like genetically superior and everything. And yet he's kind of, even though he is like a creepy guy, he's kind of like this like weird little twerp at the same time, which, you see, not to get too much into like, modern culture war stuff that we're all tired of. But, you see that sort of that sort of thing play out in society a lot with people who, maybe consider themselves to be sort of a part of a, quote unquote superior race or whatever. And then you look at them and you're like, okay, but you're like a gross little guy. I don't know,
Yeah.
So it kind of reminded me of that a bit as well.
So one kind of interesting subtext to the Coffin Joe character that I did not put in the program notes, but Maureen's didn't include this in any of the Coffin Joe films, but he did say in an interview that the way he saw it, he thought Coffin Joe served in World War II for Brazil, like in the Air Force, I think, like Brazil was an ally during World War II. So the way he sees it, Coffin Joe served in the Air Force for Brazil during World War II, and then returned home and discovered that his wife had cheated on him. And that kind of like leads to his obsession with like having a son, and also his misogyny, and also his like overall like violence towards the world. I think that's interesting. In a way, I kind of think the character is better without knowing that detail, but I don't know if that like throws light on anything we're talking about, like the sort of eugenics master race stuff that Frank was talking about,
Oh.
Maybe better to kind of just forget that Maureen said that, though. We can certainly do that too.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to talk about his ostensible driving force is to have a son for, quote, immortality. I think that's I do think that's a valid theme. I mean, it's something I thought about, like, not to that extent, like I need a child so I can live on. But I think there is a universal sense of passing on your own DNA to the next generation and family legacy. And in a greater sense, like, how are we remembered after we go? We are recording a podcast that will be available on the internet long after we're dead. And in that way, are we immortal? I don't know. Whether or not that theme, I think, is like really invested in this movie, that's a different topic.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that, the movie does set up that theme, but like for like, I don't know, the second half of the movie, that doesn't seem to be a major part of it. It's more about like just Coffin Joe in general being like a terrorizer to this small community. And then like the punishment that he gets, the torment that he receives himself, whether it's a fantasy or not. So I thought like the drive to have a son, I think that could be interesting subject matter for a horror film, and I was kind of surprised how little the movie goes into that, which might actually be a good thing, because like the scene where that is really conveyed is when he beats a woman on screen, which is very hard to watch, and then he rapes her off screen. And it's some stuff in this movie is kind of like schlocky and fun, but obviously not that stuff. It's very disturbing, and like I feel like if the movie had gone more into that, it just obviously would have been a harder watch. But so I guess I'm kind of happy they didn't go more into that theme, but yeah. And I do think like later Coffin Joe movies are more about that, but this one sets up that theme and then kind of abandons it, in my opinion. I feel like kind of along with the anti-religion elements, there's also sort of a satire of like small town narrow-mindedness and superstition. This actually was kind of inspired by something that actually happened to Maureen's when he was a little kid. He was at a funeral in Sao Paulo, and they had mistakenly pronounced the person dead, but he was actually in a coma. And so when like the corpse awoke at his own funeral, everybody in the church like ran away screaming, thinking it was like a sign from God, or like, they had all like sinned in some way. And that had like Maureen's was at that funeral at a very young age, and kind of like led to his like, belief that people in some Brazilian villages, like, maybe that element of Maureen's personality worked its way into Coffin Joe's very disdainful, superior attitude. But then, like we were saying before, I feel like that's kind of negated, because it turns out that, like, they're more right than Coffin Joe is, like these forces do actually seem to exist.
Yeah, my read on the movie, and again, why I was kind of surprised to see that, the director had bad experiences with Catholicism. My read on the movie was basically that, the moral is you should believe in this stuff. And if you don't, it's, going to end up very badly for you. Because that's kind of how the movie plays out. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I haven't seen the second Coffin Joe movie. I need to read the title again, because I love the title. This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse. from 1967. I haven't seen it yet, but I've read that like at the start of that movie, Coffin Joe is still alive and has learned no lessons. He still like does not believe in religion, does not believe in God. He blasphemes all the time. So like I agree that this movie does have that trajectory, and then apparently in the sequels they kind of abandon that for whatever reason. So I do think there's one other theme that might be good to talk about. I don't know, like historically in Brazil, I think it was kind of an interesting time in 1964. As we briefly talked about earlier, there had been a military dictatorship that kind of installed a coup in April of 1964, which was backed by the United States. They like ousted a democratically elected president who was socialist and left wing, and then kind of set up this new president or this new military dictatorship that then like kind of like ran Brazil for many, many years afterwards. So I've read some things that kind of say that At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul is like a comment on that, the military dictatorship, which maybe seems like kind of a stretch because it had just started like 7 months before the movie came out. So it's hard to really think it's too much of like an indictment of that. But I would maybe buy the fact that like there probably was a sense of like paranoia and anxiety in like Brazilian society at the time. There was all this kind of political stuff going on, and it would only get worse over the next several decades. So yeah, I don't know. I was curious what you guys thought of that. I just think to come out the same year as a military dictatorship kind of comes to power in Brazil is just an interesting sort of coincidence or not coincidence, you know?
Probably a coincidence, but at the same time, the sort of thing that would be so just in the atmosphere that, you know, it would be unavoidable for it to not somehow seep into the movie, you know?
Yeah. If anything, I mean, I have no idea what Brazil was like in the early 60s, late 50s. But if it was, I mean, you look at the horror cinema in the States or in Europe, in Japan, I mean, they were all kind of, all the films were trending towards this more explicitly violent tendency. Psycho comes to mind immediately. Other movies I've heard of but haven't seen, Dementia 13, Mario Bava's films, Black Sunday. So I think there was just maybe something in this new generation born after World War II, kind of rebelling against the buttoned up, more conservative nature of the 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And it might just come down to box office too. Like I think directors, especially like, aspiring filmmakers who didn't have big budgets to work with, I think they were realizing that like violence and shock value generates publicity and people want to see those movies. So I think that's, probably a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
All right. So as always on Camp Kaiju, we talk about the good, the bad, and the campy. I'll get us going if that's okay with you guys. I think there's a lot of good to this movie. I'm a fan of it, even though it is heavily flawed. But yeah, I'll start with the good. I just think if you're a horror fan, there's so much to love. Like, it starts with Coffin Joe giving a monologue directly to the camera about like the nature of life and death and existence. And then the opening credits, I was talking to Vincent about this before, but you have like a cackling witch and like eerie wind sound effects and like hand-drawn ghosts. It's like entering like a Halloween funhouse. It's so fun at the start of this movie. And then I think the low-budget black and white style is like so over the top, especially at the end when Coffin Joe experiences these ghosts like coming back from the dead to haunt him. Like you have like solarized images, like it looks like kind of like a negative film instead of the film that you usually see. There's even a moment where Maureen's glued glitter onto the film frame by frame. It's when Antonio, like the ghost of Antonio, first appears. It's just a wild ending. It looks so amazing. And it's, I think like the controversy of the Coffin Joe character, it's pretty easy to understand how this became such a huge figure in Brazilian culture. Like there are negative things about it for sure. And I don't know if it totally works, but just Vincent, you were talking about this, but like the dark elements, like the ego coming out, I think in some sense that's why we love monsters and horror movies, because those are the things that we suppress, but we kind of want to unleash sometimes. So I just think the character of Coffin Joe is, hideous and disturbing, but also fascinating. I don't want to talk about all the good stuff, though. I'll turn it over to you guys.
I think I liked a lot of this movie. I liked a lot of individual moments, I should say. Yeah, the the beginning grips you by the throat, and it's very gothic in nature, in tone, extremely macabre. This Rasputin imagery I would also add to the Coffin Joe look with the beard and the hat and the cape. Look, I think the eye gouging scene was one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen in a movie. But damn, it's brutally effective. Like I had to look away. I was like, oh no. And that's a good thing. As disturbing as it was a good thing.
Yeah, I would say the scenes of violence in this movie do have they're really potent, I guess is the word I would use. So even when they maybe cross the lines of good taste or get really uncomfortable, like in the scene Matt was talking about where he's, beating that woman, they have a real like visceral nastiness to them that I think is pretty effective. And yeah, the eye gouging scene that Vincent mentioned, was particularly nasty in that way. Really any of those moments are pretty striking. And the big, kind of set piece at the end where, all of the corpses are sort of rising up and kind of coming to get their revenge on him is just it's just gross, but in like a really, really like effective way. And it is very interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say all of the horror elements in this are really good. If anyone listening to this hasn't seen it and they're like a Fangoria subscriber or something, I would say that type of person would probably love this movie because there's just a lot of really like nasty, vile imagery in it.
I'll reiterate, same as you two, this movie finishes very strong. And like the final image of him slumped over with his eyes bulging out was very captivating.
Yeah.
And I do think it has like a very dark sense of humor as well. And it is disturbing too, but like, the scene where he's like eating the leg of lamb with like a funeral, like not a funeral procession, but like a religious procession going on in the window, like right behind him when like nobody else is eating meat throughout the entire day. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I have to say, I thought that scene was pretty funny too, because throughout the movie, whenever he's like railing against these societal structures and things, most of the time he's doing like really like, he's committing atrocities basically. But then this one time he's just like very obnoxiously eating that huge piece of meat that day when they're not supposed to eat meat. I thought that was funny because it wasn't like the first thing he did. It came like after I think he'd already killed some people and stuff. So
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And like some of his dialogue is pretty funny. I think there's one line where he says like funerals always make me hungry or something like that. I thought that was kind of a funny line. Let's see here. I think there's some other stuff too that I thought. Like, he's talking about how Antonio and Teresina are about to go see the witch to get their fortunes told. And Coffin Joe says, it'll be fun to see two superstitious fools under the spell of a witch. Like some lines like that are like kind of like a very dark, kind of vicious sense of humor, but I appreciated the dark sense of humor there.
I'm going to add one more good thing that I'll bring up again, ironically, later on as a not so good thing. But I truly in the moment, I was on board with what the director was doing. So this movie opens with our characters breaking the fourth wall and giving us a warning about what we're going to watch. The movie then transitions to the first scene, which is a funeral and a person being buried. Anyone who's seen Frankenstein, James Wales' Frankenstein 1,000 times like I have, that's exactly how that movie starts. Edward Van Sloan breaks the fourth wall, and we open on a funeral in a graveyard where Dr. Frankenstein and Fritz are watching. So I like that, and now, Matt, because of your wonderful notes, I know that our director was a fan of old Hollywood monster movies. So he's probably seen that movie quite a few times himself. So I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
I love that connection. I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah. Nice homage that I immediately picked up on.
Cool. Yeah, I think in general, like just, and we've all said this already, but if you're a horror fan, there's a lot to like about this movie. I think there are like lots of little homages like that, I like the transitions too. Some of the scene transitions, like there aren't any star wipes per se, but it's like almost at that level. Like there's one where it looks like the screen is like glass shattering when it cuts to the next image. I like stuff like that. I don't know. It's not very classy, but highly entertaining, I would say.
It fits right in. This is not a classy movie.
Indeed. Yes. Very, very true. Probably a good segue to the bad stuff in the movie.
So my good part was basically just all the horror moments, and I would say the bad part is like everything that's not a horror moment. Like, any of the stretches where it's just kind of like people talking, or where there's not much action going on, it's like pretty boring. And for a movie that's not even 90 minutes long, it can feel kind of sluggish at times. And and those are the parts too where I feel like the low budget is really showing. Like, when there's not gory stuff happening on screen, it's really not very visually interesting. It just kind of looks like, like a crappy home movie sometimes. And the acting, for the most part, I would say is pretty terrible in the movie. The director who plays Coffin Joe at least has like a good presence, I would say, even if he's not a conventionally good actor. But everyone else is pretty terrible. Like especially the old like sorceress lady, like very over the top. Just seems like someone who would be working at a haunted house or something. So yeah, it definitely has a lot of the flaws you would expect from a movie with no budget, basically.
There is some interesting thematic stuff in this movie, but I also think it's muddled. It's hard to know exactly what the movie's trying to say. And I think we kind of talked about that tension a little bit. Like, is it trying to be anti-religion? And if so, like, why does the end of the movie seem to say, like you said, Frank, like, you should believe in this stuff. Like, if you don't believe in this stuff, then you'll be punished somehow. And I don't think that's intentional. I think the film doesn't really know what it's trying to say, if it's trying to say anything. And I think, like, the fun horror elements, like the schlocky tone, like the cackling witch, like the fake owl that flies at the screen and stuff like it does not mesh well with like the truly disturbing stuff in this movie. And I'm okay with dark subject matter if it's like for a purpose and it's trying to like deliver an important point, but I don't think it is in this movie. And from what I've read, again, like the movies later in the series go even more in that direction. So I don't know how well that works, but yeah, that mix of like fun, schlocky Halloween type movie and like very dark subject matter, it's just always a rough combination, and definitely in this movie.
The Frankenstein homage in the beginning, which I believe it was, worked, and that was fun. And yet, after watching the rest of the movie and understanding this was like the work of it was like not his first feature, but Marines didn't really have any maybe formal training. I was just like, is it clever homage or is it more pastiche or at worst derivative? Like, it's a spooky funhouse vibe, but I think that's just maybe because that's all he knew. He just watched a bunch of movies and made his own version, but without anything truly like a different take on that tone. I agreed. I found the characters unremarkable. I found the acting unremarkable. Again, I love some of the visual stuff that the director does, especially at the end and at the beginning. But overall, I found the use of violence, sexual and physical violence in this movie, just without like any artistic integrity. Like, I just felt like it was exploitative and mean-spirited. I don't know why this director did this movie other than to make something shocking. And that just really doesn't interest me for 90 minutes, maybe a short film, but 90 minutes is a long haul when it's just, okay, Coffin Joe's doing another terrible thing with no repercussions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times horror works best when it feels like any horrible thing might happen at any moment, and you're kind of like feeling that tension of like, oh God, am I gonna like see something I shouldn't see or whatever? But like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like a classic example of that, where it's like not really as gory as its reputation would suggest, but it just like feels like, oh God, like what's gonna happen next, and this one kind of it crosses that line a few times, like with the scene Matt mentioned earlier, and just yeah, like you're saying, Vincent, it seems like it's just more set up for kind of tawdry thrills than like to really make any particular point or anything.
I thought so. And I not to judge anybody who loves those kinds of movies, but like that's the type of horror movie that I'm not really into. Maybe it's equivalent to the torture porn stuff from the 2000s. I've literally never seen such a film, so I can't speak from experience. But it's just not what I gravitate to as a viewer.
Yeah. Have you guys seen any movies by Herschel Gordon Lewis, which were also kind of coming out around this time, late 50s and early 60s?
Did he do Bucket of Blood?
Yeah.
I've seen that, yeah.
The Godfather of Gore is another movie that he made. You could probably tell by the titles what they are, basically.
Yeah. Are they like this? I haven't seen them.
Well, they're like this, I think, in the sense that like they are gory. I mean, there's a lot of tons of fake blood, like dismemberments, stuff like that, you know, but also it's like so obviously fake and so low budget and so like cartoonish almost.
Okay.
It's like a weird combination. And I feel like At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul is more disturbing than those movies, but like part of the same impulse, because like Herschel Gordon Lewis was not trying to make great cinema. Like he wanted to make money off of movies, and he knew that gore and violence was the way to do that, you know? Yeah. But still, I feel like he's remembered for like being kind of, you know, instrumental in like accepting gore, like kind of like just increasing amounts of violence in movies. Even though like by most conventional standards, they're not good movies, they're important in a way and like very amusing, sometimes entertaining and sometimes very boring. So I just feel like there's a lot of overlap between them in this movie.
Sure. Yeah, they sounded more campy maybe in their violence. Like I love campy violence and blood and guts and gore. Evil Dead fan here. But At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul, ironically, because the Coffin Joe character is so over the top, and yet it just seemed really too real. Like it didn't have a sense of flair to it.
Again, I feel like that's a good segue because, you know, is there a lot of camp in this movie? I don't know if like some of it's campy, but it carries like a dark undercurrent, and therefore I don't know if the camp is very entertaining, you know? What did you guys think of the campy elements in this movie?
Yeah, you kind of already brought this up, Matt, but it's kind of like an awkward mix of like super campy stuff and then this stuff that's like, you know, like Vincent said, borderline torture porn type stuff at the same time. So yeah, it's an interesting mix, I think, because it does make it unpredictable and you really don't know what's going to happen. Even though the opening credits kind of like inexplicably spoil like some of the highlights of the movie, by showing you some of the major kill scenes, but it is definitely like unstable and awkward.
So like there's things I'm gonna make fun of, but there's one thing that I think was legitimate camp in the film, because like by the end when Coffin Joe is in the tavern, it's the Day of the Dead. Like his antics are so at this point, like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not a real person at this point. And he's talking to this man who's the uncle of a woman in the tavern. And Coffin Joe's talking to him and just puts his hand on the woman's breast. He's just like fondling her in front of the patrons in a very campy way. Like it was like, of course you are, because you are at this point a cartoon. You're so over the top.
Over the top is right, yeah.
Yeah. And then just some funny things that just like drove me crazy, because they're like from the get-go, I did not like the Coffin Joe character because he ate this entire thing of meat with his hands and he did not wipe his fingers. I was watching. I'm kind of a neat freak when it comes to eating. Like I'm always wiping my hands after ribs or something. He doesn't do that. He doesn't lick his fingers. He doesn't do anything. He just gets his coat and goes on. And from that point on, I was like, I can't with this man. He's going around with sticky meat fingers with those long nails. And I was extremely put off the entire movie.
You know what, Vincent? He doesn't have to conform to your rules.
Damn it, this is my religion. Wipe your fingers.
He's an Ubermensch. He cares not for your ethical codes. Yeah. Yeah, I think you guys already covered the campy stuff pretty much. Like, I do love those opening credits, and I don't think they really kind of like give you. And I should specify, like, not the opening credits where we see the murder scenes. I'm talking about like when it's kind of wandering around that room and it's kind of like fun and spooky and everything. That's what I think is campy. And then the other stuff is pretty disturbing, as we've already talked about. Yeah, the fake owl, the hand drawn ghosts over those opening credits. You know,
Yeah,
that
that's
they're
fun.
yeah. But again, it just doesn't mesh well with the rest of the movie, you know?
Yeah, then you see a woman brutalized, and I was like, I don't really want to watch this, but I'm going to.
It's my fault. I'm sorry. You probably should not see the rest of the movies in this series. I haven't either, but I think they get worse in terms of that kind of thing.
I kind of want to see the second one just for that, like scene in color where it's in hell. But
I'm definitely
interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. Like the sound of some of the later ones where it's like the meta cinematic stuff, you know, featuring Maurice himself as a director. Like, I'd be interested to see that. But those are also some of the most controversial ones with like, you know, sadistic scenes of torture and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll get to those or not.
Yeah.
Movie night.
The least fun movie night you can possibly imagine, unless you like the Saw movies. Then it's right up your alley.
I do like the first Saw.
The first one's okay. Yeah. And I've seen like some of the sequels, but not all of them.
Same.
Maybe I just don't understand the mythology. That could be it. The mythology of Jigsaw. All right. Well, we've come to the point at every Camp Kaiju episode where we give the film a rating. As always, our highest rating is it is a timeless classic. It definitely stands the test of time. Our second rating is there may be some antiquated moments, but overall it's great. It stands the test of time. Number 3, it may be historically significant or just fun, but it does not stand the test of time. And our lowest rating, it is not worth revisiting. It definitely does not stand the test of time. I'm a little scared to hear what both of your ratings are going to be for this film, but Vincent, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I'll keep it brief. You can't not say it's not historically significant. It clearly is. But I think as a standalone film, this movie is a hard watch from the pacing, from the style, and then from the violence. In 2026, I mean, it's just shocking for shocking's sake, in my estimation. It holds no real artistic integrity in its depictions of rape and murder and suicide. That even Alucarda, which was a hard watch, but I liked that movie. I felt like that had some, I'll use that term, artistic integrity, that I found sorely missing in this movie. And I do not think it stands the test of time. Not worth revisiting, though historically significant.
I would go with, it may be historically significant or just fun, but doesn't stand the test of time. I think there are parts of it that are fun. Definitely not the whole thing. I think that final scene is like a knockout. Like that was a great ending. And I do like some of the like scenes of violence I think are pretty effective, just in like, being imaginatively macabre. But yeah, and that was also one thing I forgot to mention that Vincent kind of brought up there was the suicide thing. I did think, just in like a dumb lizard brain way, the concept of the woman like committing suicide specifically so that she'll go to hell so that she can come back and haunt him was kind of a like badass idea. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth seeing for anyone who, like I said earlier, anyone who's like a Fangoria subscriber who likes that more like violent or, kind of extreme style of horror would definitely want to check this out. But it is kind of a mess. It is pretty clunky, and, at times the filmmaking is borderline like Ed Wood like. So it's definitely an interesting movie. Not one I'd probably watch again, I would say, but I'm glad I saw it.
I'm glad you said that last part, Frank, because I was starting to feel pretty bad that I made you guys watch this for this episode. I feel a little called out by some of the things you guys said, but
hey, never feel bad for bringing anything to this podcast.
Both of you are right about everything you said. With strong reservations, I'm going to give this our second highest rating. There are antiquated moments for sure. There are inept moments. There are disturbing, offensive moments. I don't know if I would say overall it's great. Overall, I would say it's unforgettable. Like, you know, certain scenes. And like, I think it's really interesting in the context of like Catholicism in Brazil in terms of historically when it was released. You're right that like some scenes are borderline Ed Wood level, and some other scenes show such great visual imagination and like the level of like low budget ingenuity I do think is pretty impressive at times, especially in that ending again. And then lastly, I just think Coffin Joe, while like it's such a despicable, sadistic, reprehensible character, I think the very fact that that character went on to be such an icon is itself pretty fascinating. Again, in some pretty disturbing, uncomfortable ways. So yeah, again, with strong reservations, this is one of those instances where I wish we had a 2.5 rating because it would fall right in the middle for me. But you should watch it if you have a strong stomach, if you like horror, and if you are just interested in the history of horror cinema. I do think this is kind of a significant kind of installment in that timeline, you know, especially on like a global scale. Yeah, so I liked this better than both of you guys. Sorry about that.
Oh, well said, man. All those points are valid. There's a lot I did like. There's some I liked. So it is certainly unforgettable, for better or for worse.
Yeah, some images, like, again, the eye gouging, and like the fingers coming right at the camera, you know? Man, sorry. I can see the look of horror on your face again, Vincent.
It's haunting. It's haunting.
Yeah.
I don't like long nails. Weird thing about me, I guess. And an eye gouging in a movie. Oh, it always gets me.
Yeah. Eye trauma is really difficult for me too. I read that, sorry, a very quick tangent. Jose Mojica Marins, he had an eye operation later in life, and he included footage from that operation in one of his later movies. So that's like a level of like shock value that he goes for. Whether or not that's a good thing, up to each individual viewer, obviously.
Wow.
But don't watch that movie. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, Frank. I'm really glad, even if this wasn't a great movie, I'm glad you joined us to talk about it.
Yeah, I am glad to have seen it. I thought it was very interesting, even if far from great.
Yeah. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. Hopefully, we'll have you on the podcast again at some point in the future. Yeah. Next time on Camp Kaiju, again, we'll be talking about the Black Scorpion. So join us for that. Thanks again for hanging out with us, friends. Please rate and review the show and follow us on patreon.com/campkaiju for additional videos, reviews, merchandise, and more. Other ways to get in touch include campkaiju@gmail.com, our website, campkaijupodcast.com, on Instagram, and our voicemail number 612-470-2612. Camp Kaiju is recorded in Minneapolis, St. Paul with Minnie's Mailbox music by Ben Cook Feltz. Thanks, friends, and until next time, stay campy. Camp Kaiju is brought to you by Zach Linder and the Zach Pack, powered by Coldwell Banker Realty. Whether you're looking for your dream home, a savvy investment property, or expert guidance in home rehab and flipping, the Zach Pack has you covered. Check the link in the show notes for more information.